that I think that every story that resonates with me are stories that try to make sense of something that is impossible to make sense of. It's stories that try to combine realities that are sort of incompatible. And I think those contradictions in our lives are what horror is all about. And what I feel sometimes is that horror films sort of take the easy way out by sort of accepting the fact that suffering is just a thing that you have to deal with and even expect and even like and enjoy. And then, as a result, paradoxically, I feel like a lot of horror films feel like you're just waiting for suffering to happen. Whereas in life, it's sort of the opposite. I feel like life is basically about you're trying to reconcile with the fact that there is suffering in the world, but it's not gonna affect me. But the moment it affects us, even though we intellectually know about it and we're told about it again and again, we react by feeling that something is wrong. I mean, that's our first reaction anyway. Like, if someone dies or if we have something terrible happen to us, we go into denial right away. Which is interesting because we're so analytical and we're so into it. So I wanted to make a film that sort of followed that structure. I wanted to make a film that is so invested in the minutia of interrelational dynamics that when you introduce something that feels senseless and feels like it's out of place, you feel like the world has betrayed you, and sort of the film has betrayed you. So, and that I think is what pure horror is. So, I sort of wrote it not thinking it was a horror film, but then I realized it was a horror film.
Yeah, I was about to ask, because all my questions are filled with, so this horror movie,
Yeah.
do you call it horror? Was it supposed?
No. I didn't even think it was a horror movie. I thought it was like it's a chamber piece, but we sort of delve into horror things. But watching it, I realized that it was pretty grim.
Isn't that what
Sorry.
makes some really good horror, when it's a mixture of genres and you come for another reason and you go into horror maybe through texture and events in the movie?
I think if you go in through with empathy at least, or at least a feeling of, it's hard to explain because that's why you make a movie, because you can't really explain it with words. But I wanted the film to feel like, as opposed to a lot of horror films where you sort of just wait for the stuff to happen, I wanted the film to feel like the film tries to avoid it happening. And when it happens, it's like the film itself, or part of the film, experiences the thing as a trauma, and it replays it, and it even fragments in a way that it sort of, in retrospect, tries to make sense of it all. Because that's the thing as well, like, our memory sort of works really hard to justify stuff that happens to us. And we sort of just backtrack and see like, oh, I thought that this was going to happen because of this. And I just wanted to make a film that sort of worked in that way. So it's an experiment in trying to see like how we perceive suffering in our lives, but also in how we tell stories. Yeah.
Great answer.
Thank you. It's not practicing.
Yeah. I had a question about what's the horror landscape nowadays in Norway, and did you fit yourself in there in a specific way? Did you act against something, or what is it looking like over there since Troll Hunters?
Oh, I think it's a great environment for horror, because I feel like a lot of horror filmmakers or genre filmmakers are coming from a place of thematic resonance as opposed to just genre elements. A great friend of mine made The Ugly Stepsister, which is like a play on the Cinderella story, but she approached it from a very personal place, and it turned into a horror film. Handling the Undead is an example as well, which is sort of like a lyrical zombie movie. Uneventful on the surface level, but very eventful on an existential level. And I feel like maybe it's just ingrained in the Scandinavian sensibility that when we try to do something that isn't derivative at least we're not trying to make something based on a formula. It sort of lends itself to introspective existentialism, which is, it's cold and we're sad.
Yeah, I was about to lead you into describing the Norwegian touch.
Yeah, we're sad.
I got that, yeah.
No, but we're sad. But I think it's interesting too that we are. I think it's very interesting how, and it's a general thing, not only Norwegians, but just in Western culture. We know how to, define how we're feeling. We're talking about it, and we have all these words. But in many ways, these words sort of create gaps, because we try to define something to the point where everyone's at their own, from their own perspective, trying to define their own reality and their own suffering. And that's, especially the first part of the film, is about that, how we try to define our own suffering, and it becomes sort of a competition. And whenever you try to put words to something, it sort of demeans it. Like I'm doing. Like it's just like it unravels in a way. You try to define something and it unravels, and I feel like that's very symptomatic of a culture that's like I could say secular. It's not spiritual, and it's not. It's very competitive in a way, even when we're smart, which makes you long for being like dumb and simple in a way. Yeah. And let the ego go.
I'm gonna geek out, but I want to try and make you speak about storytelling, and because the reason I like this movie so much is because I feel like what you're talking about, you managed to show it through contrast. From a big shift in the movie, you have such contrast in the atmospheres and I would say the genres of the within the movie, and that's something that I noticed happens in a lot of movies that I'm speaking from a personal point of view, but that I found really great. For example, I'm thinking of I have a love-hate relationship with Martyrs, and I'm trying to take you towards French extremity, but that's my problem. But and that's also a movie that goes from one genre to another, and I really found that in yours. And I was wondering if you had anything to say about that.
I think genre films in general try to tap into something that is unknown, and I think the unknown sort of shifts, and sometimes it's the extreme, and sometimes it's the unsaid. But I think that reconciling two opposing thoughts. This is Thomas Merton, so it's old, but it's like reconciling like two opposing thoughts are the essence of trying to figure out how it is to be a person in this world. Like when you hear that someone has passed away, your initial reaction is, "But I talked to her yesterday," because you have to hold on to that, as if I talked to her yesterday. Excludes her dying tomorrow. And same goes with when you hear that someone has done something horrible, or but I met him at the store, he bought milk. Yeah, but people buy milk. And it's just like reconciling those two extremes. And I feel like we as people that we have a hard time reconciling them, and I think that's evident in storytelling too, because we try to maybe prime our audiences so that they accept everything. But I feel like not accepting it is as interesting. And whenever people blend genres, that's kind of what I feel too. It sort of takes on a different shape, and hopefully you sort of see yourself. I mean, that's what I love. People talk about The Shining all the time. Why do they? Because it's enigmatic, and it's cryptic, and it's strange, and you don't really know where you have it, and it sort of changes every time you see it, which is wonderful. I saw The Shining when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, it's a horror movie at a hotel. And then I saw it when I was 30 years old, and I was like, oh, it's about family dynamics. And then I had kids, and I was like, oh, it's a satire about a father who's just like, I'm writing, I'm working, and it's not even working. So it's just like, and it is all those things at the same time, but it means something different at different phases of life. And you know, the moment a film becomes a mirror and it sort of reflects who you are, it's to me it's interesting because you know it's yeah, you know.
Cinema, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone have questions after that?